Sarcopenia is defined as the degenerative loss of muscle mass, of muscle strength and quality as we age. After the age of 40, most people are affected. After the age of 50, just about everyone is affected. It's usually a 1, even a 2% loss of strength year on year. This idea of getting old, fragile, and weak, it's directly associated with sarcopenia, something that not enough people are talking about. Our guest on this week's show is 86 years old. He's skiing. He's a high-powered lawyer. He's a trial lawyer. And he's also the author of a really interesting book and the founder of a really interesting movement, Older People Staying Really Strong Lifting Lead. And this guy can still lift a lot of weight, still extremely active and very, very sharp, as you'll see at age 86. And really inspiring. We have had a lot of longevity experts on the show talking about food and lifestyle, but nobody really talking about lifting weight to stay young. I've been really interested and excited to share this episode with you. Love to hear your questions, comments, and feedback. Get in touch with me at podcast@yogabody.com. Enjoy the show. So hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to the Lucas Rockwood Show. Today's show is called Stay Strong, Middle Age and Beyond. I am here with Fred Bartlett. Fred is a former U.S. Army Ranger and trial lawyer who represented 2 past presidents. He says he's now stronger in his 80s than he was in his 20s, and he rejects the notion that fragility is part of aging. While we're chatting today, you can learn more at his site, which is StrongPath.com. Fred, welcome to the show.
Thanks for inviting me, Lucas. Glad to be here.
Can we talk about sarcopenia? This is a word that most people don't know. Most people should know. It's a growing problem. What is sarcopenia all about?
Well, what's most interesting, if you ask your doctor, any of your listeners ask their doctor about sarcopenia, the doctor won't have heard about it. We all know, we've seen in our own lives that our grandparents and our aunts and uncles all got frail and weak as they got older. And for decades, centuries indeed, everybody thought that just was a natural, inevitable consequence of aging. Now suddenly we know there's officially a disease. 2 years ago, the United States government said sarcopenia is a disease. And last year, about a few months ago, the World Health Organization said aging is a disease, which means a disease can be cured. There are remedies. They can be reversed. And I just go ask any doctor you know, and none of them will have heard of any of this, know that it's a disease. They just think that's what happens when you get old. They're wrong, flat wrong.
And essentially it's this slow but very, very steady loss of lean muscle mass. And I guess people always pin it on men, but it happens for both men and women. Isn't that right?
Yes, and even it's sometimes even worse in women, and it's loss of strength. It's because it also, your neurological system loses its ability to make the muscles operate. So it starts about age 30, and you lose about 1% or 2% a year over the years, and you gradually get weak, and then in the 50s it accelerates, and in the 60s it really accelerates, and you lose maybe half of your remaining strength in those 10 years.
Crazy. And I guess, I'm a guy who never really thought about strength. I'm a yoga guy, so we're mostly just worried about like mobility and agility and things like that. But I turned 40 this year, and I really suddenly started picking up heavy things. It's interesting. My waist is smaller now. I have a 31-inch waist. When I was in high school, I had a 34-inch waist. My waist is smaller, and I weigh more than I weighed when I was in high school. And it's really interesting. I don't know if, I lifted a little bit when I was in my early 20s, and I got into yoga, kind of put down weights forever. And then just recently, just started swinging kettlebells a couple times a week and things like this. And aside from just feeling, just the energetic lift you get, at least as a man, picking up something heavy for some reason. I don't know if it's a caveman thing or a masculine thing or a testosterone thing or whatever it is, but it just feels good. But I've really noticed differences just in my mood, in kind of this post-lifting buzz, even with very, very short moments of exertion. So I might do resistance training twice a week for 20 minutes, something pretty simple. But I'm really noticing the difference, and I'm curious, do you have an idea, do you have a minimum recommended dose for people? Like, am I underdoing it? Do I need to do more? I'm 40 years old.
Well, a couple of interesting points. America is so sedentary these days that the impact of sarcopenia is hitting way earlier. People in their 40s now, instead of people in their 70s, have lost half their strength. And so we say 3 days a week done right can make a big difference. But what I say is, how good do you want to be? In other words, it's a great life. It's a wonderful world. How good do you want to be? The harder you work out, the more intensity you exercise, the better you will be.
Give people something to think about. You're in your 80s. What is your life like?
I'm 86.
86, yeah. What is your life like now, and how could you compare it to perhaps your siblings or your cousins or people you know your age? I'm guessing it's a pretty noticeable difference.
You can't even believe. I don't even talk about anything other than just enjoying the hell out of your life. When I was 22, I was a troop commander and a U.S. Army Ranger, and I thought I was hot stuff. You know, we all did when we were young. I'm stronger now. I'm a better skier, a better golfer. I'm happier. I'm quicker now than when I was 22. And I could talk about this for weeks, but there are all kinds of everything I write about in my book and on my website is peer-reviewed official medical science. And there's for example, your doctor and your readers have never heard of telomeres. Telomere is a little tail on your chromosome. It's neat. It's on there so when the cells divide, which they have to for you to live, when the cells divide, the telomere gets a little shorter. When the telomere gets really short, you die. But there are huge studies of hundreds of thousands of people that the people who engage in intense physical exercise keep long telomeres their whole lives, and they walk, look, move, think, do everything like they're 20 years younger. Now, they don't live forever. Nobody does. But the point is, instead of living, dying like most people, you're going to die living. You're going to live till the end, and you're going to be able to do everything, everything you ever wanted to do to the very end.
Yeah.
What's better than that?
Yeah. And how are you finding in terms of cognition? You know, I think that's another thing that people worry about, forgetting names and, you know, just generally slowing down. Are you still feeling as sharp as you did 20 years ago? Do you feel like there's certain things you need to do to struggle with? Or
I'm a trial lawyer, and I'm still trying cases. That's all I need to know.
Amazing. Wow.
And I don't talk or think like an 86-year-old guy.
Yeah.
And there's medical science that what you're doing with heavy weights actually builds new neurons in your brain. And there's a lot of research. It's in my book and on my website that pumping iron actually makes you smarter. I'm not kidding. This sounds weird, but it's not. And it's not me. These are not the ravings of an old guy. This is I've read the medical science, and your doctor hasn't.
Okay, and talk to me about. I always say, you know, your goal is don't stop moving and don't get hurt after the age of 40. When I'm talking to yoga students and people on a fitness path, and one of the challenges that I find is people go from 0 to deadlift, 0 to bench press, and so what I mean is they've done no workouts at all. They hit middle age, have a middle age crisis, and then they're in CrossFit, and suddenly they're loading their joints. And they screw up a knee or they screw up their lower back. And maybe it's not that major, but then they kind of fall off the wagon. They never get back on. How do you think about easing in or throttling or, you know, as soon as you start adding load to even basic movements like a squat or something like that, risk of injury goes way up. And, of course, everything in life has a risk. But how do you think about risk mitigation?
I think about starting with a good trainer. You don't need to keep the trainer for more than 3 or 4 months until you learn how to do exercises. You mentioned squats. You know, you'll see a lot of people doing squats with a barbell on their back, and they'll be leaning forward. No, you want to go straight down and drop your butt down behind your heels. If you lean forward, it's a back exercise, not a leg exercise. Form is everything. You got to do the form. You start slow. You know, you will triple your strength in 6 months because the first thing that happens is your neurological system remembers how to use your muscles. For most people, the motor units have forgotten what to do. And once you start, like you've experienced, I was sitting there laughing when you said that, once the strength starts coming back, everything changes. You don't just feel a little better, you're better at everything. And there's a complicated evolutionary reason for this that would take me 15 minutes if you ever want to talk about it again. But our bodies were designed by natural selection to be at their very best under 24/7 intense physical exercise. Just accept that. So once we become sedentary, our bodies are in a world they weren't designed for, and we start getting all kind of chronic diseases and feel terrible.
Okay, so we've got people listening now, like a lot of people who walk into my yoga studio, and literally they've never done nothing. It's not even that they've never done anything. So it's not like they've lost the ability to lift. They've never lifted anything. They've never moved. They've never had a really great strength or range of motion. And then they go and, I'll see people try to do a marathon or try to do, CrossFit WOD 5 days a week. And they really, they go, especially this time of the year, it's the first part of the year, people go really
Right.
bonkers and then they fall
The
off.
resolution.
Yeah, and they don't last past Valentine's Day usually. But what are your recommendations for somebody who's listening now and they're going, wow, I want to be 86. I want to be able to ski. I want to be able to, do everything I did when I was 66 or when I was 26. What are your recommendations in terms of people easing into things and for sure getting up out of their chair? But what are ways that people can think about, getting back to a state of normalcy and then eventually to a state of, way above average?
Start slow and make it a habit. Make it the single most important thing in your life. Don't skip. Make it a habit. Stay in there. Use good form, but it's got to be, you've got to be thinking every time Americans are great at figuring out reasons why they don't have to work out because it's a pain in the butt, But it is. It never gets. It's not supposed to get easy. You go to failure, and so you. But you have to say to yourself every time you're doing and here's what I tell people: if you don't do this, if you don't pump iron, the time will come when you'll be like the great high school athlete that woke up in a hospital paralyzed because he didn't fasten his seatbelt. You'll be 70 years old, and you won't be able to do all the things you love doing, and you'll be saying, geez, I heard that old guy 50 years ago. I wish I'd listened. I wish I'd listened. You do not want to be lying there at 70 saying, I wish I'd listened. You want to be lying there at 70 having every single one of your friends envy you because you're doing things athletically better than you did when you were 20.
You said make it the most important thing in your life. Unpack that. What is that? How does that play out in your life in terms of like what does your day break down to?
Well, I'm a trial lawyer, and I have a lot of my clients are in Europe, in Berlin and Munich and places like that. So I get up really early. I get up at 3 every morning to talk to them, email and stuff, because it's 10 o'clock their time. And then after a couple of hours of communicating back and forth, I go to the gym, and I kill myself. And then later in the day, I do about 30 to 35 minutes of cardio in a very intense. You know what interval training is? High intensity interval training. Yeah, most people would go out and jog real slowly. That does not get the most important muscles in your body. It's got to be interval training. Run your pulse way up. Let it go down under 100. Run it up to 150 and that kind of thing. Or go out to a high school track and sprint like crazy 60 yards, then walk 50 yards. So your pulse and your heart and your body yo-yo up and down. So that's my deal. Now, I want to be the best I can be. There are huge differences. I mean, if you look on my website, I've put on there the stories of just ordinary people who got on the StrongPath, and it changed there are people who were in danger of getting fired, and now they're big shots in their companies. Because when you walk in a room and you're full of energy and you're sparkling and you don't have a pot belly, 32 waist at your age is remarkable. Most people are about 42. I'm just telling you, this is the data. And if your waist is over 40, you're on your way to being a corpse.
I guess talk to me about how this has played out, because a lot of people are really on a health kick, and a lot of the authors and people are making a splash online, and they've been doing this for 3 years. You've been doing this for quite a while. So what was it your whole life, or was there a turning point? Was it after your time serving, or when did it happen for you?
Well, like most important things in the lives of a lot of us, a woman was at the root of it. So I'm 50 years old, and I think I'm, like a lot of us do, I was God's gift. And I meet a woman who's she's unbelievable. And I say to show off, let's go to a gym. She says, fine. We walk out, and this unbelievably beautiful, smart, everything, 35-year-old woman looks at me and says, Fred, that was stupid. That was silly. You're wasting your time. You're not working out hard enough. It's foolish. Now, not many people say that to me in my life. But I said, okay, Jana, what should I do? she says, "Well, I'll find you a gym in a strip mall where the guys grunt and walk around and fart and pass out and do heavy exercises, and I did it, and I was 50 then, and I've been married to her now for 32 years, by the way. Anyway, by the time I got to be 60, my buddies were all quitting skiing, quitting golf, quitting everything.
Yeah.
And I got interested. Why would that be? And I started doing research on Medline and other medical resources, and it took me down to actually learning. Now I've learned what causes people to get weak when they're old, and I've learned what can cure it. And then my wife said to me 10 years ago, I was saying, "You got to read this. You got to read this." She said, "Well, why don't you write a book?" I said, "I'm a trial lawyer. I got a job." She said, "Well, don't bitch then. Write a book." I mean, I wrote a book. And now, my interest in this book and the impact I'm having on the world is transcending one of the great law practices in America. I represented both Bush and Obama. I'm more interested now in my project. And guess what? Big-time billionaires, having read the recent story about me in the Denver Post, are calling and saying, "What do I do? I want to get into this. What do I do? How can I help?" The word is gradually beginning to get out, and programs like yours, I absolutely promise everybody listening to this, that if you get on the StrongPath, it will change your life in ways way beyond what you could even imagine. It'll be the most important thing you ever did in your entire life. I promise you that. And if you don't believe me, just give it a whirl and you'll see.
So you're waking up, you're doing some calls to Berlin, you're going into the gym, and what are you doing? Are you doing like classic resistance training? Are you doing like deadlifts and squats and bench press and things like that, or do you use machines? Or
One day is arms and shoulders, shoulder presses, 2 or 3 different kind of curls, probably 25 sets, to the last 3 sets to failure. The next day is chest and back, lats and pecs. The next day is legs, which as you get older, and even at your age, you know is a hard day. And it's lunges, and it's squats, and it's calf raises, again to failure. And you just keep cycling. And then I do cardio just about every day, but the way I do cardio, it's mainly uphill at 15 degrees.
Okay.
So it's also
reduces the impact, right?
Yeah, well, it also is a glute exercise that way, a butt exercise.
Sure. And what do you do in terms of food? How big of a role is food for you? Do you think about it a lot, or is it kind of number 2 to lifting, or how do you think about it?
You know, that's a good question, because everybody in America would like a magic bullet. I can just eat this and I'll be different. The most important thing is, for a guy like me, my age and height and everything, weight, you got to have 200 grams of protein a day.
200, wow. You're still doing 200 today.
200 grams.
Wow,
if you don't, and you probably are a little lighter than me. I'm about 210. But you need at least 150 grams of protein a day, and if you don't, you won't build muscle. And it's hard to get, and you can't you can't have more than 30 grams at any one meal.
Right. Otherwise,
or it just goes right through you.
Yeah.
So
how are you doing?
So you find yourself thinking about the best whey protein powder imaginable, and if it's in the afternoon and you're on your way to being under, make yourself a protein shake and drink it down. Doesn't taste too good, but you got to have the protein. And then on fruits and vegetables. In the afternoon, you get a little hungry, you don't go out and eat a Whopper. You buy yourself some Honeycrisp apples, which taste great and are full of fiber. You buy yourself a lot of almonds with no salt, and you eat a cupful of almonds and a couple of apples or an orange or so, and it takes away your appetite with good stuff. When you have vegetables, you have highly colored vegetables. For example, you have peppers, green, red, and yellow, all cut up and then simmered and that kind of thing. But you got to eat vegetables. I'm not a broccoli guy, but I know I have to eat it. And on the days my wife's serving broccoli, I'll eat broccoli.
That's amazing. 200 grams of protein is a lot, and
Yeah.
you consistently hit that every day. So how much, like, what do you do in shakes? We do like half of that in whey protein shakes and the rest in food, or how does that break down?
About maybe a third. I have on my team a top dietitian, PhD from the University of Texas. So all the information I tell you about, none of it is from just gym rats. It's all from exercise physiologists, PhDs, top university people. It's all the real deal. And I give a lot of speeches to universities, medical schools, doctors, and I always say, if I'm saying anything wrong, stop me. I want to get everything perfect. So I give probably 20 lectures a year to medical schools and groups of doctors. And I keep saying, tell me if I'm getting it wrong. And they'll start arguing, and I'll say, well, have you read Lieberman's book and that kind of stuff? And so it's fascinating. I mean, I'm a trial lawyer. I've always loved learning new things. And this one new thing, as you can tell, has kind of taken over my life.
Yeah, it's amazing. And so since this turning point at age 50 up until now, what are some of the bigger shifts or maybe big reversals? Like maybe you were doing, I don't know, Jefferson curls and now you don't do them. Or like, is there anything like that where there was something that was a big part of what you do that you've now had a big 180 reversal on? Pretty consistent, huh?
If I went to the gym with you, you'd be surprised. I'm not a nice old guy. I mean, I can do seated dumbbell presses with 70-pound dumbbells.
Wow.
And I'm 86. Remember that. But there's another thing I want to be sure we get to, because there's another thing that just happened in the last year. I started putting in my speeches, and it isn't fully laid out in my book yet. Get this. We now know that lack of heavy exercise is I'm quoting this now, a primary cause of all top 10 causes of death. Harvard, top medical schools like Harvard, CDC says lack of intense exercise is one of the major underlying causes of premature mortality in the U.S. Harvard says that lack of intense exercise is a primary cause of the 35 chronic diseases that kill us. Imagine. Listen to this. This is going to blow you away. You know how Harvard, CDC, the United Kingdom, Great Britain, medicine colleges, they're all very conservative. This is what they just said. Exercise is the fountain of youth and a silver bullet. It actually reverses the aging of our cells. Regular physical activity is a wonder drug. It's a miracle cure. I mean, these aren't guys like Dr. Oz, okay? These guys are the real deal. And they say the strongest predictor of a longer life is being physically strong. Being weak is a better predictor of death than obesity. Imagine. And listen to this. This will blow you away. And you've been around a lot and you've talked to a lot of people. But when I read you this, you're going to be blown away. Now I'm going to quote probably the top medical scientist in America, who's written this in a book, what I'm going to read to you now. Harvard, Oxford, University of Pennsylvania, absolutely brilliant, written all kind of stuff. Listen to this. He says that the impact of sarcopenia and weakness and inactivity is so terrible that he advises us life is worthless after age 75. Nobody should live longer than 75. He wrote that. That's Ezekiel Emanuel. And he also wrote, but listen to this, we should welcome pneumonia because pneumonia kills you at 75 and it's a quick and painless death. When I read that, I just finished skiing with my granddaughter, who's a ski racer, and was at 14, skiing Vail in the back bowls of Vail, and one of the best days of my life. And I was 85 at the time, and I said, this guy, but it's fascinating, but it's also what most doctors think. And the totally unique thing about all this research I've done is that you can search very hard to find a medical doctor that will prescribe exercise. He'll probably tell you, take it easy, you're getting a little older.
Right.
just flat wrong.
Yeah. It's interesting. I always tell people, the physical benefits that you've outlined are just phenomenal. What I think sometimes people overlook are the mental, emotional, psychological benefits. And I always tell people, if your exercise, if your workout, whatever it is you're doing, if it's your favorite time of the day, you're doing it wrong. It should be sort of your worst. And the psychological impact of that is if you engineer the most miserable moment of your day to be that day when you're on your final rep or your final set or whatever you're doing in the gym or the studio or CrossFit Box or wherever people are, suddenly it gives you such a sense of power in the rest of your day. If you've already, if by 10 a.m. you've already engineered the worst moment of your day, everything else kind of pales in comparison. I'm curious if you've had a similar experience.
Well, and that shouldn't be surprising because the body is a unit. An organism. Everything works together. Every cell, every molecule in our body was selected for over millions, hundreds of millions of years of life for it being at its best in intense physical activity. So that means all we got to do is be under intense physical activity, and every cell in your body is better off. You feel better. You get less diseases. You're less likely to die of diseases. Of course you're happy. Of course you're happy when a little bit sad, when you run into, classmates from college who were all American athletes and my age exactly and can't walk and use motorized wheelchairs and walkers. That is sad beyond belief. And it doesn't have to be. I go to all these medical conventions of people who treat the older people. And I went. They may have 90 presentations in 3 days. And at the end, I've met with their boards of directors. What do you think, Fred? I say, well, you guys are wonderful if after somebody is at the bottom of the downward spiral of life and can't walk, you can get them so they can get around with a walker. But I was here 3 days. I didn't hear one presentation on how to prevent that in the first place. And again, it's people calling exercise a miracle cure are people like Harvard and the Center for Disease Control. It's not me. And you're a smart guy. You're obviously fascinated by exercise. You've never heard that. Guess what? I gave a talk to a bunch of surgeons a week ago, and at the end I said, have any of you ever heard, surgeons are the top. I mean, to be a surgeon, you've got to kill yourself your whole life. These guys are 50 and 60. I said, have any of you ever heard the things I'm teaching, ever heard them before? Not one hand went up. I said, do any of your medical schools, a lot of them are academic physicians, I said, do any of your medical schools teach even an hour of exercise physiology? None of them, not one We checked in the U.S., and only 4% of 170 medical schools have a course in exercise physiology. And I said to them, you're close. I admire what you guys have done and made of your lives, but you're close when no medical school teaches the one thing that can actually reverse aging. It does. If you ever get out here and you want to ski with me, I'm not bragging. I'm saying facts. It totally changes you. You're different. You talk, act, think, move, and you're better at everything. And yet, this is not taught anywhere.
Fred, what's next for you? You've had quite a career, quite a stretch here. Your legal practice, and now this StrongPath. What are you hoping to do in the next? When you look forward 5-10 years, what are you hoping to do?
Well, that's when I got into this. When I started writing this book 2 or 3 years ago, I said to my wife, I probably got 10 good years left, and this is not a 2-year project. I mean, I'm doing things like this with you because if I reach 1,000 people, a third of them are going to say, wow. And they're going to tell their friends this because right now our healthcare system is in a state of near collapse because 10,000 baby boomers a day are getting to be 65, and most of them, listen to this, something like 60% of them are going to have to be in nursing homes because they don't know what I know. There are no nursing homes. There's no government money for nursing homes. So most people reading this If you're 60, your mode is 90. That means you're most likely to live to be 90. But your health span is only 8 years. So most people reading this are going to spend 20 years in the slow torture of the downward spiral of aging, wetting their bed, unable to get out of a chair, thinking it's a big deal to get to the mailbox, when you can. And I know I've argued with doctors. I was a witness at the FDA thing on sarcopenia last year, and I said this, and they said, "You're crazy, you're wrong." I said, "You want to come compete with me?" I was never a good athlete. I went to a huge public high school in the south side of Chicago, 7,000 kids. I got cut from every team. I went out for every team. I've always loved stuff, but I'm just a guy that did research that, as far as I know, almost nobody in America has done, and I want to get the word out because I would please me very much to be dying at age 95 and thinking I changed the way people thought about aging in America. That would make me feel my whole life was worthwhile. Making a bunch of money as a trial lawyer is enjoyable. I'm good at it, but it's not as important as what I'm doing now. It's just that simple, and I've got, X years left. So thank you for helping me.
Fred, this is one of the more interesting interviews I've had in at least 6 months. Really appreciate you coming on the show. I know a lot of our listeners will want to pick up your book and follow you. Where's the best place for them to connect with you online?
The best place online is you check Amazon. My book's on Amazon, and it's now #1 in the world in exercise and aging. Yeah, and also I have my website. There's no ads on it, no pop-ups. I pay for it myself. I keep it up myself. It's got all the latest research on exercise and aging all over the world, and it's got success stories, not by people who were great football players and kept it up, but by ordinary people who were in their 50s and their lives were falling apart for a variety of reasons, and they were people I knew, and I convinced them, and they tried it. Now their lives are changed. And what counts is knowing it's never too late. If you're an ordinary person, that if you don't do this, my wife says you shouldn't scare people. I want to scare you because you don't want to be lying there at 75 thinking, I wish I'd listened to that guy.
Fred, thanks so much for coming on the show. We'll definitely send people over to your site and to Amazon. Really appreciate your time, and I hope we can stay in touch for the future.